They saw me as just another mom in a folding chair, just another woman in a too-small jacket, hands folded over a wrinkled program, sitting in the sticky Georgia heat while 100 fresh-shaved privates stood in formation on the parade field. I'd picked the chair on the end of the row so I could stretch my bad knee and keep eyes on the exits. Old habits, I guess. The band was warming up, the chaplain was straightening his stole, and the brigade commander stood under the awning, sunglasses on, expression unreadable. And my boy, my baby, was out there somewhere on that field in identical greens, hidden inside a forest of shaved heads and nervous shoulders. I should have blended into the crowd. But the problem with blending in is that sometimes the wrong people decide you don't belong at all. The first guard stepped into my peripheral vision. Boots scuffing the concrete, radio crackling at his shoulder. Before I go any deeper, if stories like this hit you somewhere real, then take a second and hit the subscribe button. Thank you. Ma'am? He hovered, shadow cutting across my program. I'm gonna need to see your wristband. I held up my arm. The cheap plastic band they'd slapped on me at the gate earlier that morning was there, clear as day, snugged above the scar that ran across my wrist like a pale white rope. He squinted. That's a vehicle pass, ma'am, not a ceremony credential. This section is for immediate family of graduating soldiers only. I stared at him, then back at the field. My son's in Alpha Company, I said. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. He shifted his weight. Young guy. Contract security, not military police, no rank, just a patch with an eagle clutching lightning bolts like it meant something. I understand, ma'am, he said in that tone people use when they don't understand at all. But you weren't on the pre-registered list. If you don't have the yellow wristband, I'm going to have to ask you to move to general seating outside the reserved area. I looked at the rows of families around me. Dads in polos, moms with curled hair and glitter signs, grandparents with iPhones ready. I saw pity in some eyes, irritation in others. A few looked away fast, like they'd been caught staring at a wreck on the highway. Outside? I repeated. Where I can't see the field? There's a screen set up, he said. You can still watch. I felt something cold settle under my ribs. My jaw wanted to clench. The way it had 1,000 times downrange when someone said something stupid and I had to decide whether to let it go or correct it. My hand wanted to reach for my ID, my awards, every piece of paper that could prove I belonged here as much as anyone. Instead, I slid the program carefully into my purse and looked the guard in the eye. What's your name, son? I asked. He blinked. It's, Luke, ma'am. Luke, I said, calm like I was back in a briefing room. My name is Sergeant First Class Elena Ruiz, United States Army, retired. I've got 42 months in combat zones and 3 bullets still in me because I believed in this uniform. My son is graduating on that field. I buried friends so kids like him could wear that flag on their shoulder. I am not leaving this chair. His jaw flexed. The radio on his shoulder crackled again. Some bored voice on the other end asking about a parking lot issue. Ma'am, I'm just enforcing the rules they gave me, he said. If you don't comply, I'm going to have to call my supervisor. And if the MPs get involved, call whoever you need, I said quietly. But I'm staying right here. He hesitated, then walked away, one hand already on his radio. I watched him go and tried to slow my breathing, tried not to let my legs start bouncing, tried not to think about how easy it is, even here of all places, to be invisible until you become an inconvenience. I'd been invisible before. In another place, under a hotter sun, with different men staring at me like I didn't belong. That time, nobody came to stand beside me. This time, I told myself, would be different. I just didn't know how different yet. I joined the Army the year my son turned 6. The divorce papers were still fresh, my bank account was empty, and the only thing I owned outright was a 10-year-old Honda and a busted hand mixer. I remember sitting at the kitchen table while he colored in a dinosaur book, recruiter's card under my thumb, wondering if I'd lost my damn mind. You're too smart for this, my mother said over the phone. Women like us don't go to war. We survive by keeping our heads down. I looked at the eviction notice on the counter. Maybe I'm tired of keeping my head down, I said. Basic training at Fort Jackson hit me like a freight train. I was older than most of the other recruits, already with a kid back home, which made me a curiosity. Some of the girls cried themselves to sleep the first night. I didn't cry. I lay awake, staring at the bunk above me, listening to drill sergeants stomp the barracks and wondered if I'd made the worst mistake of my life. Then came the first 5-mile run. The first ruck. The first time my drill sergeant, a hard-eyed staff sergeant who looked carved out of oak, met my gaze and didn't see a single mom or a pity case. He saw a soldier. "All the way, Ruiz," he shouted from the hilltop as I dragged my sore legs up the last incline. "You finish this, you can finish anything." I tasted blood in the back of my throat. My lungs burned. My son's face flashed in my head, smeared with chocolate ice cream, asking if I'd be home in time for his school play. I finished. At AIT, I learned to be an intelligence analyst. Nights were maps spread across plywood tables, satellite images pinned to corkboards, acronyms stacked on acronyms until they became a second language. I learned to read the land like a story. I learned to recognize threat patterns, to brief officers who outranked me by a mile without letting my voice shake. When I pinned on sergeant, my platoon threw me a barracks party. Cheap pizza, cheaper beer, country music turned up too loud on a wheezing Bluetooth speaker. "You're gonna be first sergeant one day," Specialist Klein slurred, leaning on my shoulder. "I'm calling it now, Sarge. First Sergeant Ruiz. Has a ring to it." "Yeah," I'd laughed. "You just focus on not failing your PT test again." We deployed to Afghanistan when my son was 10. FOB Iron Gate wasn't much to look at. Hesco walls, plywood hooches, a chow hall that smelled like dust and burned coffee. But it was ours. Days bled into nights in the skiff. My world reduced to grainy drone feeds, radio chatter, and the constant whir of the air conditioner fighting a losing battle against the desert. Outside the wire, our infantry guys and route clearance teams drove through valleys that might or might not be seeded with explosives. Inside, we pushed data and tried to stay one step ahead of ghosts with rifles. That was where I met Captain Dan Hart. He was tall, square-jawed, the kind of officer they put in recruiting posters. Fresh from a staff job, jumping into the intel fight with that mix of confidence and ignorance that made enlisted soldiers exchange glances behind his back. "Sergeant Ruiz," he said the first time he strode into our cramped little workspace. "You're my intel, NCOIC, yeah?" "Yes, sir," I said, standing at parade rest. "S2 section, NCOIC, sir." He smacked a hand on the table, smiling. "Good. I want us aggressive, proactive. I'm not going to be another captain who sits on his hands while our guys get blown up out there. Understood?" "Yes, sir." His energy was contagious at first. He listened. He asked questions. He wanted to be briefed twice a day, sometimes 3. When we flagged a possible IED cell operating in the Shah Dara corridor, he leaned over my shoulder at the map, eyes bright. "If we catch these guys," he told me, "I'm putting you in for an award, Sergeant." We didn't catch them. They caught us. 3rd Platoon was on its way back from a key leader engagement when the lead MRAP rolled over a pressure plate. The blast rattled windows all the way across the FOB. Smoke smeared the horizon. In the TOC, radios erupted, overlapping voices yelling sit-reps and grid coordinates. "Contact! Contact! Contact!" My headset was suddenly too tight. My screen blurred. I gripped the edge of the table hard enough to blanch my knuckles as the icons on the digital map clustered around the dirt road we'd briefed that morning. I knew those call signs, those voices. I knew which trucks they were in. "EOD en route," someone shouted. "Birds are spun up. Dust-offs unavailable. They're already—" Captain Hart's voice cut through the noise. "Sergeant Ruiz," he snapped, "where the hell did this come from? Your last read on that route was low threat." I swallowed hard, throat suddenly dry. "Yes, sir. Based on last week's pattern, the IED activity had shifted south of—" "Yeah, well," he said, eyes like ice. Tell that to 3rd Platoon when they're picking up pieces of their squad leader off the asphalt. Later, after the dust cleared and the casualty reports came in, we stared at the map together in silence. Staff Sergeant Miller, KIA, PFC Jordan, KIA, Specialist Rhine. Double amputation, critical. I went back through every report, every signal intercept, every grainy photo, chasing the ghost of the thing I'd missed. The weight of it sat on my chest like a cinder block. You can't catch everything. My squad leader, Sergeant Jenkins, told me quietly in the smoke pit that night. The enemy gets a vote. You know that. Yeah, I said, staring at the gravel. Try telling that to their families. Captain Hart never yelled at me again after that day. He didn't have to. The way he looked at me was worse, like I was a weapon that had misfired. Useful, but dangerous. A reminder that his war wasn't as neat and controllable as he wanted. He started double-checking my slides, questioning my calls in front of the staff, asking the warrant officer for second opinions on assessments I'd already briefed. It wasn't sabotage, it wasn't cruelty. It was something quieter and sharper, doubt. The kind that seeps in and rots from the inside. By the time we redeployed, the cinder block on my chest had a name. Failure. People think the villains in a veteran's story are always the ones shooting at you. They're not wrong. The men who hid in irrigation ditches with command wires in their hands, the ones who smiled at you in the market during the day and laid bombs at night, yes, they were villains in the simplest, clearest sense. But there are other kinds. The system that chews people up and spits them out when they're broken. The leaders who hide their fear behind anger. The bureaucrats who lose your paperwork for the 3rd time and shrug like it's no big deal. And sometimes, it's the voice in your own head that won't let you forgive yourself for the things you couldn't control. My villain wore all of those faces at different times. After my 3rd deployment, the VA doctor looked at my chart, at the list of injuries and diagnoses and little summary at the bottom that might as well have read, "Too expensive to keep." "You've done more than enough, Sergeant Ruiz," he said, gentle. "You've got nerve damage in your leg, chronic pain, and PTSD. The Army's going to recommend medical retirement. You should focus on healing." Healing, like it was something you could circle on a calendar. Like it was a place you could ruck to if you just tried hard enough. When my retirement orders came, they were 3 sheets of standard copy paper in a manila envelope. 13 years, 3 deployments, 2 Bronze Stars, 1 Purple Heart, a combat patch I'd earned twice over, and it all came down to 3 pages and a signature. "Out processing briefing is at 0900, the clerk said, sliding the envelope across the desk. "Make sure your CIF gear's turned in before then." "Yes, Specialist," I said automatically. He blinked, surprised by the "yes, Specialist." Habit's a hell of a thing. You spend half your life addressing everybody by rank. It's hard to turn it off. The Army didn't throw me a going-away ceremony. No formation, no plaques, no shadow box. My platoon gave me a busted-up coffee mug with "World's Okayest NCO" sharpied on the side and took me out for tacos. We laughed too loud. We pretended it was just another Friday night. Then they went back to the motor pool the next week, and I went home. Home, where my son had grown into a man while I wasn't looking. He was taller than me now, broad shoulders, a jawline that looked too much like his father's when he was angry and too much like mine when he smiled. "You sure about this?" I asked him the day he came home in a brand new hoodie with Army stamped across the chest. He shrugged, but there was something fierce and steady in his eyes. "I've seen what you did, Mom. What you gave up. Somebody's got to carry that on." He signed his contract before I could talk myself into stopping him. On the day he shipped to basic, I hugged him on the curb outside MEPS and whispered the things I wish someone had told me when I was 19. Don't volunteer for stupid stuff, but don't hide either. Take care of your equipment and your feet. Find the kid who's struggling and help them, but don't let them drag you down. Don't argue with a drill sergeant, ever. And if they're yelling at you, it means they haven't given up on you yet. He laughed, nerves buzzing in that laugh. "Anything else?" "Yeah," I said, gripping his shoulders. "Remember who you are. They're gonna break you down and rebuild you. That's the job, but they don't get to erase you, mijo. That's yours to protect. He hugged me so hard my ribs popped. I'll make you proud, he said. You already did, I whispered. Then he walked through those doors and vanished into the machine that had made me and then spit me out again. For 10 weeks, I checked the mailbox like a crazy person. When his first letter came, I read it 3 times in my car before I even made it up the stairs. It smelled faintly like sweat and the industrial soap from the barracks laundry. Drill Sergeant Willis is a beast, he wrote. But he reminds me of your stories about your first sergeant. Acts pissed off about everything, but you can tell he cares, especially about the ones who are falling behind. I smiled at that. Some things don't change. In another letter, he wrote, We had a class about combat stress. The chaplain came and talked about losing people. He asked if anyone had family who served. I raised my hand and told them about you. They looked at me different after that. Like I had something to live up to. I folded that one carefully and tucked it into my wallet. When the graduation invitation came, it felt like a second chance. A chance to sit in those stands as a mom, not as a soldier with a ruck waiting by the door. A chance to watch my son stand where I once stood and feel something other than regret about all the things I'd done and failed to do. I bought a new dress, nothing fancy, just something that didn't smell like work or old sweat. I dug my low-heeled shoes out of the back of the closet. I ironed my jacket and polished the small lapel pin my old platoon had given me on my last day. A tiny oxidized brass shield with the words, "No one fights alone," stamped across it. I pinned it over my heart. In the mirror, I saw a woman with tired eyes and scattered silver in her hair. But I also saw the hint of the soldier I'd been. That was enough, I thought. On the parade field, the second guard was bigger than the first. He had a buzz cut, a chewed-up mouthguard tucked in his cheek, and a sunburn on his neck that had peeled and freckled over. His badge read Supervisor. He didn't bother with small talk. Ma'am? His shadow fell across me like a storm cloud. We've got a problem here. People were watching now. I could feel the weight of their gazes like pressure on my skin. Your man already explained his problem, I said, making my voice even. I explained mine. I'm here for my son's graduation. You're not on the cleared list, he said. No yellow wristband, no reserved seating. Those are the rules. He held up a clipboard like it was a holy book. Thick stack of papers, highlighted names. Some bureaucrat's idea of security. I drove 8 hours to be here, I said. 10 if you count the time we spent in that line at the gate. I cleared security. They saw my invite. They gave me this. I tapped the white band on my wrist, instead of the yellow one because the kid at the checkpoint said they were out. That's not my fault. I'm not moving. His jaw tightened. Ma'am, I need you to understand something. This is a military installation. We don't play games with security protocols. You can watch from the overflow area. You'll still see your son walk the field on the screen. I thought about all the times I'd sat in a dark TOC, watching real-time footage of soldiers I knew move across the screen in white silhouettes, their lives reduced to heat signatures. It isn't the same, I wanted to shout. It will never be the same. Look, he said, shifting tack when I didn't answer. I get it, okay? You're proud, emotional. The word emotional landed on me like a slap. Something inside me snapped. I stood up. The move startled him. Most people in these situations stay seated, cling to the armrests like anchors. I rose in one smooth, practiced motion, the same way I'd stood to address officers in 2 bright briefings and pissed off squad leaders in the field. You don't get it, I said quietly. My voice didn't need to be loud. Years of briefing in noisy TOCs had taught me how to pitch it just right. Low, steady, the kind that makes people lean in. I've walked through gates more dangerous than this. I've sat in rooms where one wrong word could cost lives. I have watched kids younger than you bleed out on dusty roads because they believed in the flag on that field. I pointed at the sea of uniforms, the colors snapping in the wind. Do not stand there with a clipboard and tell me you get it. Color crawled up his neck. Ma'am, if you don't move, he said, each word clipped now, I'll have to involve the military police. At that point, it's out of my hands. I looked at him, at the first guard hovering behind him, nervous now. At the other families, watching with the eager dread of people witnessing a fight they don't want to be part of. My heart pounded in my ears. Part of me, the part that had given briefing after briefing on escalation of force, on de-escalation techniques, on how to avoid turning a bad situation into a tragedy, whispered, "Let it go, stand down, it's not worth it." Another part of me, the part that had sat quietly while people assumed I was someone's scared wife instead of someone's squad leader, whispered back, "If you let them move you now, you will never forgive yourself." A third voice, quieter and older, stepped between them. It sounded like Staff Sergeant Miller, the one we'd lost in Shah Dara, the one whose name still curled in the corners of my mind like smoke. "Pick your ground, Ruiz," he said, the way he had the night we'd argued over whether to push a patrol into a sketchy village. "Not every hill is the hill you're supposed to die on." I took a breath. "Call the MPs if you need to," I said to the supervisor. "But I'm not getting up. If they want me gone, they can tell me themselves." He stared at me, breathing hard, torn between digging in and backing off. He chose wrong. "Fine," he snapped. "You asked for it." He raised the radio to his mouth. "Security to MP desk," he said. "We've got a non-compliant attendee in the reserved section, requesting assistance." The words hit me like a blast wave. Non-compliant, attendee, not soldier, not veteran, not mother of a graduating private, just a problem to be solved. I sat down slowly, my joints suddenly older than my years. I locked my hands together in my lap so no one could see them shake. Out on the field, the band struck the first notes of the national anthem. Everyone stood. I stood too, muscle memory yanking me upright before my brain could even process it. My hand went to my chest, fingers brushing the little brass shield on my lapel. My eyes found my son in the formation, third row, center, chin up, eyes fixed straight ahead. He couldn't see what was happening in the stands. Couldn't see the guards, or the way my throat tightened, or the MPs crossing the back of the bleachers in crisp uniforms and stiff patrol caps. He just stood there, hand over his heart, while the song that had played at too many ramp ceremonies washed over us. I sang along. My voice cracked on the word free. The MPs didn't rush. They had the easy confidence of people who knew the uniform on their back commanded respect whether they deserved it or not. The lead MP was a sergeant. I recognized the chevrons on his chest out of habit. Two privates flanked him, younger than my son, eyes flicking nervously between me and the security guards who'd called them. Wikipedia 1. "Ma'am," the sergeant said when the anthem ended and everyone sat. "I'm Sergeant Lewis with the military police. You mind telling me what's going on here?" I saw something in his eyes that the security supervisor didn't have. Curiosity, not assumption. "The ceremony staff messed up their wristbands." The supervisor jumped in before I could answer. "We've got strict entry protocols for the reserved area. She refuses to move. Been confrontational with my team." Confrontational, I repeated, tasting the word. The MP sergeant looked at me, then at the white band on my wrist, then at the program in my lap with my son's name circled 3 times in blue ink. "Ma'am?" he asked. I held his gaze. "I'm Sergeant First Class Elena Ruiz, medically retired," I said. I didn't enjoy calling myself that, but I'd learned that sometimes you have to lead with the thing people recognize. "My son is in Alpha Company. I drove here from Houston." The gate guard ran out of the yellow wristbands and gave me this one instead. "I'm sitting where the invitation told me to sit." I paused. "These men," I added, nodding at the guards, "told me to move to overflow so they could check a box on their clipboard." The sergeant's jaw twitched. He shifted his weight, thinking. "Ma'am, do you have an ID on you?" he asked. I reached slowly into my purse and pulled out my old CAC card, edges worn from years of being shoved into body armor pockets and vehicle pass lanyards. It was expired, but the photo was me in uniform, hair pulled back, eyes steady. It was proof. He took it, looked at it, then looked back at me. "Thank you, Sergeant," he said. and the way he said sergeant, not ma'am, landed in my chest like a small, unexpected mercy. He turned to the security supervisor. Sir, this section's for family of the graduates, right? Immediate family, yes, the supervisor said, guarding his clipboard like it was the last lifeboat off a sinking ship. And she's got an invite, the MP said. Gate cleared her. It's kinda hard to get onto this post at all these days. I know, I work the gate on swing shift half the week. That's not the point, the supervisor said. The point is, the sergeant interrupted, polite but firm. You called us about a security concern. I'm not seeing one. I'm seeing a mom who's here to watch her son graduate. He looked at me again, like he was weighing something, then added, and I'm seeing a retired NCO with a combat patch and a Purple Heart on her record. She's not a threat, she's a guest. The supervisor bristled. If we make exceptions, there's no point in having protocols. The sergeant smiled without humor. Sir, with respect, the point of protocols is to keep people safe, he said, not to make sure a piece of plastic matches a highlighter on a spreadsheet. One of the younger MPs coughed into his fist, smothering a grin. My chest loosened, just a fraction. Sergeant Lewis, the supervisor said, clearly not used to being challenged by anyone in uniform. If anything happens here today, Lewis said, his patience thinning, my soldiers and I will handle it. That's our job. Right now, there's nothing happening except you disturbing this lady and the people around her. He handed my ID back with a quick, respectful nod. You're good to go, Sergeant, he said. Enjoy your son's big day. Thank you, I said softly. It should have ended there. In another world, maybe it would have. But some people don't know when to retreat. As the MPs turned to go, the supervisor muttered under his breath, just loud enough for me to hear. Place is crawling with head cases these days. My vision narrowed. I'd been called worse downrange, by enemies and by friends, by civilians who watched too many movies and leaders who hadn't seen the inside of a tent in years. But hearing it here, in this place that smelled like fresh-cut grass and new beginnings, while my son stood on that field in a uniform I'd bled for, that was a bridge too far. I stood up again. Before I could open my mouth, a hand landed gently on my shoulder. Lena? The voice hit me like a jolt of electricity. I turned. The man standing in the aisle looked older than the version in my memory, but the bones were the same. The same steady eyes. The same scar above his left eyebrow from where he'd smacked his head on the back of an MRAP hatch in '09. He was in civvies, button-down shirt, jeans, but his posture gave him away long before the faint outline of dog tags under his collar. Jenkins? I breathed. He grinned. Hey, Sarge. And behind him, filling the aisle like a wall, came the rest. Klein, his once baby face now framed by a beard gone half gray. Hernandez, broader in the shoulders, pushing a stroller and juggling a diaper bag. Kowalski, walking with a cane but still towering over everyone around him. And more. Faces from another life. Ghosts given flesh again. My old platoon. My lungs forgot how to work. What, how? I stammered. You think we were gonna miss this? Jenkins said. Your kid wrote us. Got hold of my number off your old Facebook, sneaky little punk. Said his mom wouldn't tell anybody she was coming because she didn't want to make a big deal out of it. He rolled his eyes. We decided we'd make a big deal out of it for you. They moved into the row without asking, shuffling chairs, murmuring apologies to the families they squeezed past. A few of those families recognized the subtle limp here, the tattoos there, the way they scanned the crowd even as they laughed. Veterans recognized their own. The security supervisor's eyes went wide as the row around me filled with men who carried themselves like they were still pulling security in a hostile village. I saw him counting them, mentally measuring risk. This a problem? Jenkins asked him lightly, catching the look. We can scoot to the overflow if you want. Might be tight, though. My knee acts up if I don't have space. Lewis, the MP, watched all this with the faintest hint of a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "We're good here, gentlemen," he said. "Enjoy the ceremony." The supervisor swallowed, recalibrating. He looked at me one more time. But he didn't say head case again. He didn't say anything. He turned and walked away. My hands were still trembling when I sat back down. Jenkins dropped into the chair beside me, joint popping audibly. "Still pissing off authority figures, huh?" he murmured. "Still showing up late," I shot back automatically. We both laughed, that half-hysterical, half-relieved laugh people make when they've just avoided disaster they didn't see coming. Out on the field, the commander stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed, voice echoing over the loudspeakers, "welcome to today's graduation ceremony." As he talked, as the script rolled on about duty and honor and service, my mind drifted to Shah Dara, to the map table, to the faces we didn't get to bring home, to the letters I never wrote to their families because I didn't know what to say that wouldn't sound hollow. "You still carry them, don't you?" Jenkins said quietly, like he could read my mind. "Who?" I asked, though I already knew. "Miller, Jordan, Ryan, all of them." My throat tightened. "Don't you?" "Every day," he said. He flexed his right hand, the one with the scar from where shrapnel had kissed his knuckles. "But I learned something a while back. They don't want us living in that one bad day forever." He nodded toward the field. "They want us living for this, for them, for the ones who came after." On the PA, the commander called out the first company. "Alpha Company, stand by to be recognized." The formation snapped to attention like it was one organism. And for the first time that day, the weight on my chest loosened enough to let joy in. They called the names one by one. "Private First Class Andrew Bailey. Private James Carter. Private Thomas Ruiz." My son stepped forward on cue, boots hitting the chalked line perfectly. From this distance, he looked like every other soldier, same uniform, same haircut, same rigid posture. But I could see the tiny tells that made him mine. The way his left ear stuck out just a little more than the right. The tiny scar on his chin from the time he'd tripped running through the sprinkler at age 4. The determined set of his jaw when he was trying not to cry. The commander shook his hand. Drill Sergeant Willis clapped him on the shoulder and murmured something that made him stand a little taller. I found my voice. "That's my son!" I shouted, cupping my hands around my mouth. Other parents were yelling too. Names, nicknames, whoops, and whistles. But somewhere in that noise, my son's head turned, just a fraction. His eyes swept the stands. They found me. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to a line between us. His gaze flicked to the men beside me, Jenkins nodding, Klein cupping his own hands to shout something unintelligible, Hernandez bouncing his baby on his knee. My son smiled, slow, disbelieving. Then the formation pivoted and moved, and the moment was gone. But the warmth of it stayed. "Proud of you, kid," Jenkins muttered under his breath, like my son could hear him from here. "Runs in the family," I said. The ceremony rolled on. Speeches, certificates, applause. Kids stepping off that field with a rank on their chest and the weight of a world they didn't fully understand yet settling on their shoulders. I watched them and saw my younger self. Full of fire, full of questions, full of a certainty that we were on the right side of history. I watched their families and saw myself too. Full of fear, full of pride, full of a hope you don't dare name out loud because you know how fragile it is. "Think he'll stick with it?" Klein asked during a lull, nodding toward my son. "If the army doesn't break him first," I said. Kowalski snorted. "Breaking's part of the process, Sarge. You taught us that." "Yeah," I said softly, "but I also taught you how to put yourselves back together." Jenkins looked at me sidelong. "You taught us more than that," he said. "You taught us we were more than our worst day." The words landed heavier than he probably meant them to. My mind flashed again to that map, to Hart's glare, to the casualty list. More than our worst day. Was I allowed to be? When the announcer finally declared the ceremony complete, the crowd surged toward the field like a tide breaking through a dam. "Go on," Jenkins said, nudging my shoulder. "We'll be here when you get back." "You're not coming?" I asked, half teasing. He shook his head. "This first moment's yours, always is. We'll get our hugs after." I made my way down the bleachers carefully, bad knee complaining, heart pounding in my ears for an entirely different reason now. The grass smelled like summer and distant diesel. Soldiers and families collided in a swirl of uniforms and civilian clothes and camera flashes. For a second, I couldn't find him. Then I heard my name. "Mom!" He barreled into me like he had when he was a kid, nearly knocking me over. I stumbled and laughed and wrapped my arms around him, feeling the hard lines of his new muscles, the stiffness of new fabric. "You did it," I whispered into his shoulder. He pulled back, eyes shining. "You came," he said, like he genuinely doubted I would. "I told you I would," I said. "Yeah, but..." He glanced around at the chaos, at the uniforms, at the gate in the distance. "Sometimes, I don't know. I thought maybe it'd be too much, being back on post." I swallowed. "It was," I admitted. "But you're worth it." He looked over my shoulder and froze. "Mom," he said slowly. "Are those?" I turned. Jenkins had ignored his own rule about waiting for later. The whole platoon was making their way down toward us, moving at the joint-aching pace of men whose bodies kept the score of every jump, every march, every badly loaded ruck of their 20s. My son's eyes went wide. "You didn't," he whispered. "I didn't," I said. "You did. You wrote them?" He flushed. "I found some of their names on your old pictures. Did some searching. I just thought, I don't know, you always told stories about them. I wanted them here, for you." Jenkins reached us first. "Thomas," he said, sticking out his hand. "Heard a lot about you, kid." Thomas looked at his hand like it was a medal. "Yes, sir, I mean, Jenkins barked a laugh. "Relax, Private. I'm just Jenkins. You're the one currently serving. I'm just an old guy who yells at clouds." One by one, they introduced themselves. Klein told him embarrassing stories about how I used to fall asleep at the intel desk with a pen still in my hand. Hernandez told him about the time I'd chewed out a captain for trying to send a squad on a route I knew was dirty. Kowalski told him, choked up halfway through, how I'd sat with him in the aid station after he got hit, holding his hand while he cried not from pain, but from the terror that he'd left his guys out there alone. My son listened like a man drinking from a fire hose. He looked at me differently after that. Not like I was just his mom, but like I was something else too. Something that existed before him and outside of him. "You never told me half of this," he said when the stories lulled. "You never asked," I said gently. "And I didn't want to weigh you down with my ghosts." He shook his head. "They're not just your ghosts," he said. "They're part of why I'm here. Why all of us are." He glanced at my lapel pin. "No one fights alone, right?" he quoted. I blinked. "You read my posts more closely than I thought," I said. He shrugged, embarrassed. "Mom," he said after a moment, voice quieter. "Those guards. I saw some of that from the field. I didn't know what was happening, but I saw MPs and..." I thought for a second. He didn't finish. "You thought I'd caused trouble," I finished for him. "You wouldn't have been wrong." He grinned weakly. "You good?" The question was bigger than the moment, bigger than the guards, the wristbands, the petty power plays. It was a question that had lived in my chest for years, unanswered. Am I good? Am I okay? Did I do more harm than good? "Ask me tomorrow," I almost said, defaulting to the old joke we used downrange when someone asked if we'd make it. Instead, I took a breath. "I'm better," I said. "Seeing you here, seeing them..." I nodded toward my old platoon, who were currently raiding the snack table like a squad hitting a target. "It helps." He nodded like he understood that helps was as big and sacred a word as love in my vocabulary. The security supervisor walked by then, clipboard tucked under his arm, jaw tight. He gave us a wide berth. Jenkins watched him go and snorted. "Guy's lucky this is Happiness Day," he said. "Otherwise, I'd be tempted to educate him on respecting his elders." "Leave it," I said, surprising myself with how little venom I felt. "We've got better things to focus on." "Damn right we do," Klein said, lifting a plastic cup of lukewarm punch. "To Private Ruiz, the newest in a long line of stubborn idiots who think enlisting is a good idea." "Hey," my son protested, laughing. We all raised our cups. "To the kids who come after," Hernandez added. "To the ones who didn't make it this far," Kowalski said. "To the ones trying to figure out how to live with it," Jenkins said, eyes flicking to me. I held my cup a second longer. "To the quiet ones," I said finally. "The ones who don't look like what you think a warrior looks like. The ones people try to move from their seats. May they always have someone who stands up beside them." We drank. The sun slid lower, hot and relentless, but it felt less like an interrogation lamp now and more like a blessing. Later, when the crowds thinned and my son went to turn in his rifle and collect his gear, I found a bench under a scraggly tree near the parking lot and sat, stretching my bad leg. The base PA system was playing some country song about flags and fields and trucks. Cars idled in long lines, full of families trying to squeeze an entire future into the 3-hour window before their soldiers shipped to AIT. Jenkins sat beside me, groaning as he lowered himself. "You ever think we'd be those old vets sitting on a bench at a graduation?" he asked. "Honestly?" I said. "I didn't think I'd make it to 30. He nodded, lips tightening. "Same." We sat in comfortable silence for a while. "Lena," he said finally, voice softer. "You know none of us blame you for that day, right?" The cinder block on my chest shifted. "You shouldn't," I said. "It was my job to see it coming. I didn't." "It was all our job," he said. "And you saw 100 things that never happened because of you. You saved my ass twice in 1 week that month. You kept Miller's squad off that road 3 other times before they hit it. We remember the times the enemy got one past us. We don't keep score of the ones we stopped." I stared at my hands. "The captain did," I said. "Hart?" Jenkins snorted. "Hart was a good officer in some ways, but he was a scared kid under all that swagger. That blast scared the shit out of him. He was looking for somewhere to put that fear that wasn't in the mirror. You were convenient, and you were strong enough to take it." "I didn't feel strong," I said. "Yeah, well," he said, "you didn't feel strong when you were climbing that last hill at Jackson either. But you made it then, and you made it through this. You're here, your kid's here. That counts for something." He nudged my shoulder with his. "We don't follow weak NCOs, Lena. You know that." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I thought, after I got out, that you all forgot about me," I admitted. The words surprised me as they left my mouth, naked and small. "Forgot?" He laughed. "Sarge, we still call out your name on poker night when somebody's about to make a dumb bet. What would Ruiz say about this? And then we don't do it." "That doesn't sound like me," I protested automatically. "I made plenty of dumb bets." "Maybe," he said, "but you made them with your eyes open. That's the difference." My son appeared at the end of the walkway then, duffel bag slung over his shoulder, cap tucked under his arm. He spotted us and waved, his grin wide enough to split his face. "Ready?" he called. "Yeah," I said, standing slowly. "We're ready." Jenkins clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Hey, Sarge," he said. "You ever start to spiral again? You call one of us. You don't do that alone. That was the deal back then. It's the deal now." "No one fights alone," I repeated. "Damn right." He pulled me into a quick, fierce hug that startled me with its familiarity. "Take care of yourself, Ruiz," he murmured. "You earned it." For the first time in a long time, I believed him. We said our goodbyes, with promises that probably would turn into group chats and Christmas texts and maybe 1 or 2 actual visits. And then my son and I walked toward the car together. "Where to now?" he asked, squinting against the sun. "Hotel first," I said. "You smell like a barracks," he laughed. "Yeah. Drill sergeant said we reek of freedom and poor life choices." "That sounds about right." We walked a few more steps in silence. "Mom?" he said. "Yeah." "When I was on the field and they said veterans, please stand to be recognized." "Did you stand?" I hesitated. For years, I'd stayed seated at that line. In ball games, in ceremonies, in church on certain holidays. I'd told myself it was because I didn't want attention. The truth was, I didn't feel like I deserved it. Today, though, when the announcer's voice had echoed over the field and the crowd started to clap and the MPs had just left and my hands were still shaking, I'd felt my knees lock. And then, slowly, I'd pushed myself upright, knees popping, heart racing, alone in my row for a second. Then, not alone, as other shapes rose around me. Old guys in faded unit hats. Women with hair gone white. A kid in a wheelchair with a high and tight and hollow eyes. We'd stood there, a crooked, imperfect forest of people who'd all carried something heavy once. And for the first time, I didn't feel like an imposter among them. "Yeah," I said to my son. I stood. "How'd it feel?" he asked. I thought about it. "Scary," I said honestly. "And good, and right." He nodded, thoughtful. "One day," he said quietly, "I'll stand too." I stopped walking. "You already did," I said. He looked at me, baffled. "You stood on that field today," I said. "You raised your hand when you swore in. You stood up for yourself when it got hard in the barracks. It's not just about what you did over there, it's about who you are everywhere." He absorbed that like he absorbed everything else. Slow, serious, letting it sink into whatever core of steel lived in him. "Still," he said after a beat, "I want to earn it, like you did." I smiled, something warm and fierce unfurling in my chest. "Then do it better than I did," I said. "Learn from my mistakes. Be the leader I wanted to be before I got tired and scared and sad. Take care of your soldiers. Listen more than you talk. Fight for the ones who can't fight for themselves. And when some idiot with a clipboard tells a quiet old woman she doesn't belong somewhere she bled for..." I glanced back toward the parade field. "You make sure she doesn't have to stand alone." He grinned. "Deal." We reached the car. As he tossed his duffel into the trunk, my phone buzzed. A text from Jenkins. "You ever tell this story? Tell it right," it read. "We've got enough war stories. People need to hear this side too." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I opened my notes app and started typing. If you're hearing this now, somewhere between the dishes and the laundry and the long drive home, maybe you're one of us. Maybe you're the kid in formation, sweating under a too-stiff uniform, trying to figure out who you are in a world that suddenly has a lot of rules and not a lot of answers. Maybe you're the mom in the stands, wondering if you did the right thing signing those papers with them. Maybe you're the veteran sitting in your car outside the base gate, hands shaking on the steering wheel, wondering if you can make it through one more ceremony without breaking. Maybe you're security with a clipboard, doing your best to follow protocols in a world where everybody's yelling about safety. Whoever you are, hear this. Some of the bravest people you'll ever meet don't look the way you expect. Sometimes they're the loud ones. Sure, the ones with the high and tight and the chest full of ribbons. But sometimes they're the quiet woman on the end of the row with a limp and a lapel pin. Sometimes they're the old guy in a faded unit hat who still flinches at fireworks, but shows up anyway because his grandson asked him to. Sometimes they're the kid who barely passed his PT test, but never leaves a buddy behind on the ruck. The world will try to move them, to shuffle them to overflow, to tell them they're too much, or not enough, or no longer needed. Your job, our job, is to stand up beside them, to say, they belong here. To be the old platoon that shows up when the quiet warrior doesn't think anyone remembers her anymore. To be the MP who chooses common sense over blind protocol. to be the son who sees his mother not just as mom, but as a soldier who carried more than anyone will ever know. If you've served, you're part of this. If you love someone who served, you're part of this too. We tell these stories not because we enjoy reliving the hard parts, but because there's power in naming them. In laughing and crying and saying out loud, "Yeah, that was me. That happened. I survived. I'm still here." And if you're still here, you're already doing more than you think. So if this story hit you anywhere close to home, if you've ever sat in a folding chair feeling small and out of place, if you've ever wished someone would show up for you the way these guys showed up for me and my son, stick around. There are more stories like this. Stories about battle and barracks and what comes after. Stories about fear and failure and redemption that smell like jet fuel and coffee and cut grass. Stories that might not make the history books but live in the muscles and memories of the people who were there. Hit that subscribe button, not for me. For the quiet ones. For the ones who think nobody sees them anymore. For the ones who, right this second, are standing on some parade field or city bus or grocery store aisle trying to remember how to breathe. Join us, listen with us, remember with us. Because no one fights alone, not anymore.